My parents always preferred my spoiled sister. They disowned me after learning about my unworthy business. Today I'm thriving, and my sister has lost her job. Parents demand to make my sister the director of my business. I'm Naomi, and I've always been the black sheep of my family. From the moment I was born, I was a disappointment to my father. He'd been hoping for a boy, and when the doctor announced it's a girl, his face fell. I guess that set the tone for our relationship. My older sister Sarah was the golden child. She was smart, talented, and could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Me? I was just there. Our house was always filled with praise for Sarah's latest accomplishment. Did you hear? Sarah got another A on her math test, or look at this beautiful painting Sarah made. Meanwhile, my report cards were met with indifference, and my crayon drawings ended up in the trash. As I grew older, I learned to fend for myself. I made my own lunches, did my own laundry, and figured out my homework without help. It wasn't ideal, but it made me strong and independent. One day when I was about 12, I discovered something that would change my life. I was hungry after school, and with no one around to make me a snack, I decided to try baking cookies. I followed a recipe I found in one of Mom's old cookbooks, and to my surprise, they turned out pretty good. The next day, I brought some to school. My classmate Jenny took a bite and her eyes widened. "Naomi, these are amazing, did your mom make them?" I shook my head, a small smile forming on my lips. "No, I did." Word spread quickly, and soon kids were asking if I could bring more. For the first time in my life I felt special. I had found something I was good at, something that made people notice me. When I got home that day, I was bursting with excitement. "Mom, Dad, guess what? I made cookies and everyone at school loved them." Mom barely looked up from her magazine. "That's nice, dear, just make sure you clean up the kitchen when you're done." Dad frowned. "Cookies? Naomi, you should be focusing on your studies, not wasting time in the kitchen." My heart sank, but I didn't let their lack of enthusiasm dampen my spirit. I had found my passion, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As the years rolled by, the divide between my sister and me only grew wider. Sarah graduated high school with flying colors and got accepted into a prestigious college. You'd think our parents had won the lottery, the way they carried on. Meanwhile, I was still in high school, my grades decent but unremarkable. But I had found my calling in the kitchen. Every weekend I'd whip up a storm of cakes, pies and cookies. The neighbors started placing orders, and soon I had a little business going. "Naomi, honey," Mrs. Rodriguez from next door said one day, savoring a bite of my chocolate cake, "this is heavenly. You've got a real gift." I beamed at the compliment. "Thanks, I'm thinking of going to culinary school after graduation." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, that's wonderful, you do so well." But when I shared this dream with my parents, their reactions couldn't have been more different. Mom's face fell. "Culinary school? But that's just cooking." Dad's reaction was even worse. He slammed his fist on the table. "Absolutely not, no daughter of mine is going to waste her life in a kitchen." "But Dad," I protested, "I'm good at it. People love my baking." He scoffed. "Good, so what? You think you can make a living flipping burgers or decorating cakes? Wake up, Naomi. The real world doesn't work like that." Mom chimed in, her voice softer but no less dismissive. "Honey, you need to think about your future. Look at Sarah, she's studying finance, she'll have a real career." Their words stung, but I wasn't ready to give up. I started selling my baked goods at school fairs and to classmates. The response was overwhelming. "Naomi, these cookies are insane," my friend Jake said, mouth full of chocolate chip goodness. "You should open a bakery or something." I grinned, imagining it. My own little shop, filled with the smell of fresh bread and sweet pastries, seemed like a dream come true. But at home, the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. "What's this?" Dad demanded one day, holding up a flyer for my bake sale. I swallowed hard. It's for school, we're raising money for new computers." He narrowed his eyes. "Don't lie to me, Naomi. I know you've been selling your little treats. This stops now, you hear me? You need to focus on real studies, not this hobby." "But Dad, I'm making good money." "Money?" He interrupted. "You call a few dollars for cookies money? Do you know how much your sister makes at her internship? That's real money, Naomi, that's a real future." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. I just thought, "No, you didn't think." He cut me off. "Listen to me carefully. This baking nonsense ends now. You're going to buckle down, get your grades up, and apply to proper colleges. If I hear about one more cake or cookie, so help me, we'll cut you off. No more college funds, no more support, do you understand?" That night I cried myself to sleep, my dreams of culinary school crumbling like an overcooked cookie. The next day I started researching business colleges, my heart heavy but my resolve strengthened. I would find a way to make this work. Somehow, someday, I'd follow my passion. But for now I had to play by their rules. College flew by in a blur of numbers, spreadsheets and financial reports. I threw myself into my accounting studies, trying to convince myself that this was the right path. But every time I passed a bakery or caught the scent of fresh bread, my heart ached for what could have been. Finally, degree in hand, I landed a job at a large corporation. My parents were thrilled. I rented a tiny apartment, determined to stand on my own 2 feet, but as I sat at my desk, day after day, crunching numbers and filing reports, I felt my spirit slowly dying. One evening, unable to take it anymore, I dug out my old recipe book. The pages were worn, stained with butter and flour, reminders of happier times. I whipped up a batch of cupcakes, losing myself in the familiar rhythms of mixing and baking. The next day I brought them to work. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh my God, Naomi! These are amazing," my coworker Lisa exclaimed. "Where did you buy them?" I hesitated, then admitted actually. "I made them." Word spread quickly. Soon people were asking if I could make cakes for their birthdays, their kids' parties, even their weddings. I started small, just a few orders on weekends, but soon I was spending every free moment in the kitchen. My tiny apartment was constantly filled with the aroma of vanilla and chocolate. The turning point came when our company's anniversary rolled around. The director himself approached me. "Naomi, I hear you're quite the baker," he said. "How would you feel about making the cake for our anniversary party?" My heart raced. This was a huge opportunity, and a huge risk, but I couldn't say no. The day of the party arrived. I wheeled in a massive cake, decorated with the company logo and intricate sugar flowers. As I unveiled it, the room fell silent. Then the director broke into a huge grin. "This is incredible," he turned to the crowd. "Everyone, give it up for Naomi, our resident accounting wizard and apparently, master pastry chef." The room erupted in applause. The director actually hugged me, whispering, "You're wasted in accounting, my dear. This is your true calling." His words stuck with me. Over the next few months, as the orders kept pouring in, I realized I had a decision to make. I was working 2 full-time jobs, accountant by day, baker by night. Something had to give. One sleepless night, covered in flour and surrounded by orders, I made my choice. The next day, I handed in my resignation. But why?" My supervisor sputtered. "You're one of our best." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I found my true passion," I said simply. I rented a small commercial kitchen and threw myself into my new business. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. There were nights I stayed up until dawn, filling orders, days when I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. But slowly, surely, my little bakery grew. I hired my first employee, then my second. We moved to a bigger space. My cakes and pastries became known throughout the city. Through it all, I kept it a secret from my parents. As far as they knew, I was still a successful accountant, climbing the corporate ladder. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment to tell them the truth. But deep down, I knew I was just afraid. Afraid of their disappointment, their anger, their rejection. As my bakery business grew, I knew I needed to step up my game. I dove headfirst into the world of modern marketing, determined to make my little shop stand out in a crowded market. I created social media accounts for the bakery, posting mouth-watering photos of my creations daily, but I was always careful to keep myself out of the frame. No selfies, no meet the baker posts. Just cakes, cookies and pastries in all their glory. Despite my paranoia, the business thrived. I partnered with a local courier service for deliveries, extending our reach across the city. I implemented a loyalty program, offering discounts to repeat customers. And then came my masterstroke Sweet Tooth Saturdays. Once a month we'd open our doors and offer free samples to anyone who walked in. The first time I was a nervous wreck. What if no one comes? I fretted to Jess. She rolled her eyes. "Boss, have you tasted your own stuff? They'll be lining up around the block." She was right. By noon we had a queue stretching down the street. As I watched people's faces light up with each bite, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the ovens. Our popularity skyrocketed. Soon we were catering high-profile events, supplying desserts to upscale restaurants, even shipping our signature cookies nationwide. And with success came money. More money than I'd ever imagined I'd make just baking cookies, as my dad would say. Before I knew it, my income had surpassed my sister's bank salary. I started helping my parents out, always under the guise of my successful accounting career. When their roof needed replacing, I footed the bill. When they mentioned wanting to see Europe, I surprised them with tickets. "Oh, Naomi, you shouldn't have," Mom said, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. While I was building my business and helping our parents, Sarah was living it up. She still lived at home, spending her entire paycheck on designer clothes, fancy gadgets, and her latest obsession, self-care. But none of that mattered to my parents. In their eyes, Sarah was still the star. "Did you hear about Sarah's promotion?" Mom would say, beaming. "Vice president of her department at only 28. I'd force a smile. "That's great, Sarah. Congrats." All the while I was running a successful business, employing a dozen people, bringing joy to hundreds of customers every day. But in this house, that counted for nothing. That day started like any other at Sweet Dreams Bakery. I was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake, when Jess burst in, waving an order form. "Boss, you're not gonna believe this," she said, her eyes wide. I wiped my hands on my apron. "What's up?" "We just got an order for a birthday cake. Delivery address is," she paused for dramatic effect, "your parents' house." I felt like I'd been doused with ice water. "What? Are you sure?" She nodded, handing me the form. There it was in black and white. My childhood address, my mother's name, even a note specifying it was for her birthday. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. "Jess," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "clear my schedule. This cake is going to be my masterpiece." For the next week I poured every ounce of my skill and love into that cake. 3 tiers of Mom's favorite flavors, decorated with hand-piped flowers and delicate sugar sculptures. It was, without a doubt, the best work I'd ever done. As I put the final touches on it, I imagined the scene of my parents' awe as they saw the cake, their pride when I revealed I'd made it, and the joy of finally being able to share my true self with them. The day of the party arrived. I showed up early, a small gift in hand to maintain my cover. The house was bustling with relatives I hadn't seen in years. "Naomi," Aunt Clara exclaimed, pulling me into a hug, "looking at you all grown up, still crunching numbers." I nodded, the familiar lie sticking in my throat. "Yep, still at it." I couldn't wait for my cake from the bakery, and then the doorbell rang. Mom answered it, and there was our delivery guy, holding the distinctive Sweet Dreams Bakery box. "Special delivery for the birthday girl," he announced cheerfully. A hush fell over the gathering as Mom carried the box to the dining room table. She lifted the lid. There were gasps and murmurs of appreciation as the cake was revealed in all its glory. I stood there, my heart pounding, waiting for the right moment to speak up. But before I could open my mouth, Dad cleared his throat. "Before we celebrate," he said, his voice unusually serious, "we have something we need to address." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to my parents, who were now wearing identical expressions of, was that disgust? "We recently discovered something," Mom continued, her voice cold, "a secret that's been kept from us." The silence in the room was deafening as my parents' words hung in the air. I stood there, frozen, as my father's voice, dripping with disdain, shattered the life I'd built. "Can you believe it?" he said, addressing the room full of relatives. His finger pointed at me accusingly. "Our Naomi here has been lying to us all this time. She's not an accountant, she's a pastry chef." He spat the words out like they were poison. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but no words came out. This couldn't be happening. Dad continued, his face red with anger. "We always dreamed our daughters would achieve real success, become respected members of society." He gestured towards Sarah, "like your sister here. Vice president at her age. That's something to be proud of." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, not meeting my eyes. "But you," Mom said, her gaze boring into me, "we raised you, gave you every opportunity, and this is how you repay us? By becoming an ordinary cook?" The word ordinary stung more than I could have imagined. Didn't they understand? Couldn't they see what I'd built? Suddenly Dad strode over to the table where my cake sat. With one swift motion, he flipped the box over. I watched in horror as my creation, the masterpiece I'd poured my heart into, crashed to the floor in a mess of icing and sponge. A collective gasp went up from the guests. "We're not eating this stuff," he sneered. "It's beneath us." Mom nodded in agreement. "Naomi, you've shown us that you're unworthy to be among respectable people, you've disobeyed us for the last time." Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. "We hereby disown you, you're no longer our daughter." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. I looked around the room, desperately seeking an ally, someone to stand up for me. But I was met with averted gazes and uncomfortable shuffles. Aunt Clara, who had hugged me so warmly earlier, now whispered to Uncle Joe, "I always knew that girl was trouble." Others nodded in agreement. The room that had moments ago been filled with festive cheer now felt cold and hostile. "Leave," Mom said, her voice was ice cold. "Leave now and don't ever contact us again." I stood there, rooted to the spot, tears streaming down my face. How could they do this? How could they dismiss everything I'd achieved, everything I was so cruelly? "Didn't you hear your mother and dad barking? Get out." Somehow I found the strength to move. I turned and walked towards the door, my vision blurred by tears. As I reached for the handle, I heard Sarah's voice, tiny and unsure. "Mom, Dad, maybe we should." But her words were cut off as the door closed behind me. I stumbled down the front steps, the same steps I'd climbed countless times as a child, but now, they felt foreign and unwelcoming. I made it to my car before the sobs overtook me. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of the family I'd just lost, I felt something inside me break. The dream I'd held on to for so long of finally gaining my parents' approval, of them understanding and appreciating who I truly was, had shattered like my cake on the dining room floor. I don't know how long I sat there, crying until I had no tears left. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood I'd grown up in. I knew one thing for certain: I could never come back here again. The days following the disastrous birthday party passed in a blur. I moved like a ghost, barely eating, hardly sleeping. The bakery kept running, thanks to my incredible staff, but I was just going through the motions. Gradually, as the shock wore off, I threw myself into work with renewed vigor. If my family couldn't appreciate my passion, I'd show the rest of the world just how extraordinary an ordinary cook could be. The bakery flourished. We expanded to a second location, then a third. Magazine features, TV spots, a cookbook deal. Success came in waves, and I rode each one with determination. I bought a beautiful apartment, my own little sanctuary in the city. 2 years after the fallout, I met Jack. He was kind, supportive, and thought my cakes were the best thing since well-sliced bread. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small but perfect. As I looked around at the smiling faces of friends and chosen family, I realized I didn't miss my blood relatives at all. These people, my employees, my friends, my husband, they were my real family now. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The bakery continued to thrive, and Jack and I built a happy life together. I had everything I'd ever wanted except, perhaps, closure. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon 5 years after the birthday party incident. I was in my office reviewing plans for our newest location when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Hello? Naomi," my mother's voice, tentative but unmistakable. "Don't hang up, please. We need to talk." What followed was a barrage of information. The bank where Sarah worked had lost its license, mass layoffs, Sarah unemployed for months, they needed help. Before I could process this, my father's voice cut in. "You need to give Sarah a job at your bakery. As the director, Sarah has actual business experience, she should run things and you can just be one of the bakers." The absurdity of it all hit me then. 5 years of silence, and this was why they reached out. A cold laugh escaped me. "Let me get this straight. You disown me, throw me out, and now you're demanding I give up my business to Sarah. We gave you life," Dad bellowed, "we raised you. You owe us." Something snapped inside me then. All the pain, all the anger I'd suppressed for years came rushing out. "I owe you nothing," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You made your choice 5 years ago. I'm not your daughter, remember? I'm just an ordinary cook who's beneath you. I certainly won't be helping you or Sarah. Goodbye." I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. For a moment I just sat there, letting the reality of what just happened sink in. Then, slowly, a smile spread across my face. I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted. I owed them nothing. I was free. Just when I thought I had closed the book on my family saga, life threw me another curveball. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in years. Sarah's number. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, I answered. "Hello. Naomi." Sarah's voice was soft, hesitant. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling." I took a deep breath. "It's okay, Sarah. What's going on?" What followed was a conversation that would change everything. Sarah apologized profusely for our parents' behavior, both recently and 5 years ago. "I had no idea they called you asking for a job," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I would never have asked for that. I'm so sorry, Naomi." I felt a knot in my chest begin to loosen. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot." She went on to explain how losing her job had been a wake-up call. I realized I'd been living someone else's dream all this time. Banking, finance, it was never what I wanted. It was always Mom and Dad's vision for me. I listened, barely breathing, as my sister poured out her heart. "Seeing you follow your passion, build this amazing business, it inspired me, Naomi. I've decided to change my life. I've enrolled in interior design courses. I want to create beautiful spaces. I want to be true to myself, like you've been." Tears welled up in my eyes. All these years I'd thought Sarah was the golden child, living her best life. I never imagined she might be struggling too. "That's wonderful, Sarah," I managed to say. "I'm happy for you." There was a pause, then Sarah's voice came again, thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you, Naomi. You stood up for yourself, followed your dreams despite everything. You're living the life you want, and that's amazing." I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. Years of pent-up emotion, the hurt, the anger, but also the longing for my sister came pouring out. We talked for hours, catching up on lost time, sharing our hopes and fears. As the conversation wound down, Sarah hesitantly suggested, maybe we could meet up sometime, just to talk, share news, and support each other." I found myself nodding, even though she couldn't see me. "I'd like that, Sarah, I'd like that a lot." Over the next few months, Sarah and I met regularly. We shared coffee and pastries from my bakery and of course laughed over old memories and supported each other through the challenges of our respective careers. Sarah's interior design business was taking off and I couldn't have been prouder. As for our parents, we heard through the grapevine that they'd disowned Sarah too when she quit banking. They told anyone who would listen that their daughters had disappointed them, one an ordinary cook, the other a frivolous decorator. But Sarah and I knew the truth. We were living our dreams, building successful careers, doing what we loved. We had found our own paths to happiness and fulfillment. One day, as Sarah and I were having our weekly catch-up at my bakery, she looked around at the bustling shop, then back at me with a smile. "You know," she said, "I think we turned out pretty great, all things considered." I laughed, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the ovens. "Yeah," I agreed, "I think we did." As I watched my sister sketch design ideas on a napkin, surrounded by the sweet aroma of fresh pastries and the chatter of happy customers, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This was my life, messy, challenging but ultimately sweet. I had fought for my dreams, lost some battles, but ultimately won the war.